Here's the deal, estimated at 35 to 40 million people.
The Kurds comprise one of the largest ethnic groups in the world without a separate country. They have been invaded and conquered by some of the all-time greats, including the Sumerians, the Persians, Alexander the Great, the Mongols, and the European Crusaders. But they were largely autonomous until the 7th century AD, when they were invaded and conquered by the Ottoman Empire, and despite many uprisings and revolts, they remained a part of the Ottoman Empire until its collapse at the end of the First World War. After World War I, a series of treaties were signed giving the Kurds their own country. But in 1922, the Turks and the British reneged on the agreement. The Turks did it because, well, hey, they're the Turks. And the British did it because about that time they discovered oil around the Kurdish city of KÜRTCÜ. At that point, the British decided to take three different groups living in the region: the Kurds in the north, the Sunni Arabs in the west, and the Shia Arabs in the south, and declare them a country. This is how Iraq came to be. Meanwhile, the rest of the Kurds were split up between three other countries: Turkey, Iran, and Syria. In Iraq, a fake monarchy was installed, and the country became another part of the British Empire. Confused yet? Throughout the 20s, 30s, and 40s, the Kurds in northern Iraq revolted against the British. To subdue the Kurds, the British waged some of the first large-scale air attacks in history. In what was to be a predecessor of the use of air power during the Second World War, the British assembled an air force of approximately 1,500 planes in Baghdad and would regularly bomb the city of Suleimani and other areas in the Kurdish region. Which brings us to an interesting trivia question. Who was the first person to use mustard gas on the Kurds? If you said Saddam Hussein, you would be wrong. The correct answer is Winston Churchill. In 1958, the monarchy was overthrown and the British were kicked out of the country. Unfortunately, the Kurds were still not granted autonomy. In 1970, a peace agreement was signed between the Iraqi government and the Kurds of northern Iraq, granting the Kurds self-rule. The man who negotiated the peace deal was an up-and-coming Ba'ath Party member by the name of Saddam Hussein. Yes, that's Saddam Hussein. In 1974, the KDP attacked Iraqi troops after the government refused to give them control of the province of Kirkuk, which was traditionally Kurdish territory. When the CIA withdrew support from the Kurds, the Iraqi government suppressed the revolt.
In 1979,
Saddam Hussein came to power. In 1988, he retaliated against the Kurds for supporting Iran during the Iran-Iraq War, slaughtering thousands of civilians and uprooting 1.5 million people from their homes. Which brings us to the first Gulf War. In 1991, the first George Bush asked the Shias in the south and the Kurds in the north to rise up against Saddam. They did, but when they were not supported by the West, Hussein's troops slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people. Shortly after, the no-fly zones were put into effect, and Saddam's troops pulled out of the Kurdish region in the north, leaving the Kurds to set up their own government. Which they did. The two parties that were in power, the PUK, or the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, and the KDP, the Kurdish Democratic Party, held elections, and everything was fine until 1994, when the two parties began fighting. The fighting continued until 1996, when the two parties declared a ceasefire. They negotiated a settlement in 1998, and they agreed to split the Kurdish territory into two regions, one under the control of the KDP and the other under the control of the PUK. This continued until 2003, when the United States launched an attack against Saddam Hussein and removed him from power, which brings us all the way up to today.